All right, so I guess we can begin. So hi everyone, my name is Sentezaki, and I want to start by thanking everyone for taking time to join this Zoom session. Just making sure you guys can hear me. Perfect. All right. So a brief description about UgBuddy and why it was started. So UgBuddy is a group that I started when I was in college, and the reason why we started the group was to because we had issues when we came from Uganda. We had issues with school and getting into school and who to reach out to if you need help with maybe college admission, filling out your FAFSA, because most of us, our parents didn't grow up in this U.S. school system, so we needed guidance. So we figured, why not take our little knowledge that we have from our experiences getting into schools in the U.S. and then use that to help other people that might be in the same situation. And then that kicked off. And then after school, people, we graduated and then went into the workforce. And then there was still this void of how do we keep in touch with each other and how do we share resources that we have and try to help each other within the Ugandan community. And that is why we're doing these sessions. And as you can see, they're going to be broken down into different industries. So today's session is going to be on finance and accounting, and then the next one is going to be on healthcare, which is in 2 weeks from today. So we will start by introducing myself. Again, my name is Sendazaki Ronde, and I came to the U.S. after finishing my senior 4 at King's College Budo. Then had to go to go back to high school in order to get into the school system, and then did my bachelor's degree at Babson College in accounting and finance. Then worked, did interned where I met Steven at PwC, and then worked at Brown Brothers, and now I'm currently working at JP Morgan Chase in Boston, and I work in the corporate investment bank group. And that's a little brief history about myself. And I'll hand it off to Diana, our co-moderator.
All right. Well, I'd like to start off by saying good evening to all of you. My name is Diana Kasue, and I'm really excited to be here today as co-moderator for this event. And just to give you a quick overview of my background, I was in Uganda for briefly, I'm going to say about 4 years. I went to Taiba Junior School when I was there. And then I came to the US at a I've been here, I'm going to say probably about 20 years at this point. So I did graduate from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. My main focus was leadership and organizational change. And then after I graduated, I went on to pursue a career in human resources, which present day finds me in that field. I am currently the Human Resources Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Massachusetts Senate. And I can honestly say I love working there. It brings joy to me every single day to be there. But also, as a Ugandan working in the diaspora, I've found it extremely insightful and helpful to connect with fellow Ugandans so we can find a way to open up doors for each other that are genuinely not always readily available. And I'm sure, as you all know, sometimes you can't just knock on a door, you actually have to open it. Sometimes you even have to knock it down if you have to. And that's why it really is an honor of mine to be here to help facilitate this conversation this evening. And we are going to be speaking to 4 very accomplished Ugandans that will be sharing their tips on how you can succeed in the finance and accounting field. And I look forward to hearing everything that they have to discuss. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Stephen, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thanks, Senti. Hi, everyone. So my name is Stephen Moshe. I'll follow the 2 panelists before me. Went to high school in Namasagali, then went to the University of Dar es Salaam. Well, I did a year in Makere. Then I went to the University of Dar es Salaam, where I did my first law degree. Came back, went to LDC, then came to Boston for my LLM at Harvard. Finished that, did a postgrad at Harvard, and then I joined what was at that point in time Coopers and Lybrand. Coopers and Lybrand merged with Pricewaterhouse to make what is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've been with the firm for 20 something years, I believe, all in Boston, except I did a secondment in London for 2 years. And right now I lead the tax market, the Northeast tax market, which is about 100 partners and about 1,000 staff covering Albany, Providence, Hartford, and Montclair. Back to you, Senti.
Thank you, Stephen. Marcy, if you want to go next, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mercy Wakweka. I was wondering if I should go the finance definition first or like go to like where I came from in Uganda. Anyway, so I'm currently at Bank of America. I am part of the principal investments team. We make venture capital and growth equity investments in fintech companies. Prior to that, I worked in consulting, so strategy consulting, and that was after I completed my MBA. And prior to my MBA, I worked in investment banking at Deutsche Bank in New York. I completed college here. So undergrad, I did 3 years in engineering. And this was after I transferred from my career, after spending 1 year there, also doing engineering. I did go to Gaza for 6 years. So I guess that's how I know a lot of people that at least on the speaker panel. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcy. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Senti. So my name is Sam Rugunda. I am Ugandan. I did my primary school in Uganda. I did my O-level in Uganda. I went to Budo, just like Senti. I did my A-level equivalent in the US. So I went to boarding school in New Mexico. And then I went to college in Connecticut. I did my master's in New York. And then I started working in New York back in 2009. So I worked in New York for about 7 years. And then I moved over to London, which is where I am right now. And I've been in London for about just over 4 years. And happy to be here with everyone.
Thank you, Sam. So last but not least, Alan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Galiwango, and I'll start from my Ugandan background. I went to King's College Budo for O and A level, came to the US around 2001, and did my undergrad in math and computer science at Manchester University, then did a grad school at Northeastern here in Boston, my master's in computer science. And at Northeastern, I was also a resident assistant, and that's how I managed to get free room and board. And then I was also a research assistant for a professor, and that's how I managed to pay for my tuition. Well, he was paying me by reimbursing my tuition. And that's how I also got into finance and part of technology. Once I graduated, I worked for a small company called Air Software Group as a software developer. We worked building order management systems, and that's just tools that make sure people can trade in the stock market. Worked there for 6 years and left, and then came to Acadian Asset Management, where I work now. It's a hedge fund pretty much. And what we do is we trade, our main clients are pension funds and city retirement funds. We manage assets. We have about 100 billion under management. My role there as a principal developer, is leading the trading and investments team. I have a team of developers spread across Boston, Singapore, Australia, and we support our traders and the portfolio managers, making sure that their trades get to market as fast as possible. And we also handle executions and fills, which is trades coming back from the market, making sure that the whole process moves and flows smoothly. So I'm sure we'll get into the weeds throughout the night, but yeah, I'm happy to be here too.
Thanks, everyone. So we'll get started, but before that, a few ground rules. We'll ask everyone to mute themselves, and then if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then one of us will read it back. That'll probably be the easiest way to do that. And then, so we'll have our first question to the panelists, and I'll go to Stephen first. Stephen, so I know that being, an immigrant in the U.S., we often face some challenges climbing up the corporate ladder, and sometimes, we can't even reach a ceiling. So I know from my experience, I've had issues with, for example, my name being non-English, and I'm thinking if they see my resume, that might affect their decisions. That's one of my, challenges that I face. So, Stephen, do you have any experience in those, and how do you navigate through those challenges in your corporate career?
So, and I guess we have some college folks on this webcast, or is everyone working?
We have some college folks.
But all right, trying to figure out what our audience is. So the first thing is, and this irks me a lot, right? Because I do recruit a lot for the company. I think there's something about, and it just might be that we don't know, right? Most companies, not only PwC, but I'm sure JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, any one of these companies, right? Recruit from their internship pool, right? First and foremost, right? It is only if they can't get enough hires from the pool of interns that they'll go outside. And I think we as a community do not seem to value internships and the importance of internships. So first and foremost, if you're in college, right? And some companies actually do internships, as early as junior year, right? You're supposed to be thinking about internships during your junior year, right? And, it's never too late, right? But I think that would be the first thing, because for you to try and get a job in corporate America outside of the internship program is extremely difficult, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, whether you're in college or you're trying to shift from one company to another, you've got to network. You've got to try and figure out if you know anyone who knows someone in that company. A lot of other communities do that. A lot of other communities spend a lot of time networking, right? I get calls from colleagues at work that say, well, can you look into this person's resume? And I said, who are they to you? Well, my neighbor's friend's friend, or something like that, right? So that would be the second point I would make. Then once you're in corporate America, I've always said that corporate America has a language unto its own, right? It has, we all speak English, right? And most of corporate America speaks English. But I'm not talking about speaking English, right? You could speak English fluently. But corporate America has a language independent of the English language, right? And your success, I think, depends on your ability to understand, appreciate, and interpret that language, right? It is what is not said. It is what is said, how it's said. It's the tone. It's the body language. It's a whole bunch of stuff, right? And trying to understand that with the help, and the only way you understand and learn this language is by talking to, your peers, but also talking to folks who've been around the block quite a bit. So, and this is something that a lot of successful people do, right? They have a board, quote unquote, a board of advisors, which is really just a group of people that you consult with that, hey, this is what happened. How would you deal with it? Or am I overreacting? Or am I underreacting? And to be honest with you, most times in our community, I feel people underreact than overreact, right? Modesty does not work. Humility does not work in corporate America. And unfortunately, I think culturally we are more modest, we're more humble, right? And I'm generalizing, I apologize, but I'm trying to speak to the broadest denominator here. And as a result of that, if you're humble and you're modest, you're not going to ask for things, right? I mean, one of the first questions people ask during promotions discussions is she expecting it? Has she asked you whether she should be promoted? Right? And so if you didn't ask, right, the answer is going to be no. It's like, well, if she really thought she deserved it, she would have asked you, right? So a few tidbits, Senti, but I think there's a lot on that topic that I don't want to sort of dominate the discussion, but there's a lot around that topic in terms of entry into corporate America, and then how do you excel within corporate America?
No, I agree 100%, because as we know from Uganda, we taught to kind of like, fear authority and, kind of be timid, don't talk back. So when I came here, like, it was really a challenge to see, fellow other white students talking back to the teachers, and then same thing in corporate America. So making that transition and understand that, you need to speak up in meetings, you need to, get your voice heard. And then that's a good point. So Marcy, someone asked a question about F1 status in regards to Stephen's point about internships. What about students who have F1 visas? How do they, navigate that challenge?
So as an F1 student, it's even more important what Steven spoke about, which is having those internships up front, and there's programs that are there. So your OPT, or I think there's another one I forget the name of, which allow you to intern. But the way I think about locking down a job post graduation is trying to lock that job before you graduate, such that when you graduate, you already have someone who's willing to sponsor your H-1B visa. So I'd say the emphasis there is try and find something before you graduate to be able to get that sponsorship. So the question then becomes, how do you find that something earlier on before you graduate? Going back to the challenges that you asked, two of the things that I faced when I was starting out my career was, one, I did not have a good understanding of what career options were out there. And especially from a finance perspective, I was not a finance major. And so I really didn't know what finance entailed, how you get into it, all the different functions in finance, because finance by itself it's a very huge industry. So really understanding what are the various functions of finance. I'd say that was challenge number one, not really understanding and not having done the homework of understanding what it was. The second thing was not understanding the system, which is what Stephen was alluding to when it comes to language in corporate America. So not understanding that people start preparing for those first internships and first jobs very early on in the process. Some people start in high school, right? Some people start doing all these leadership activities. They start getting engaged in clubs. They start doing internships in their freshman and sophomore years. And there's programs to help people with this, which I actually didn't know about all these programs. So I would say the second part of it was just not knowing and understanding the system of all those things you need to do when you're still in high school or college to be able to start landing some of those big opportunities.
Thank you for that, Marcy. Alan?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Marcy and Steven said, I think the one thing I would re-emphasize in terms of the biggest challenge faced by an immigrant making it in corporate America, closed mouths don't get fed. We come from a very subservient culture where we are taught to be humble and not question anything or not ask, but that's the total opposite in the corporate world. You, at least in my personal experience, when I started, I was very scared or humble. I thought they might recognize what I do. Just work hard and you'll make it. But what happens is getting your technical knowledge or your capabilities only work to get you in the door. Once you're in the door, it's how you sell yourself or how you network and market yourself. So when it comes to reviews, Steve hit the point right on the head. Definitely be flamboyant. Don't be shy about your accomplishment. Don't sell yourself short, and never be afraid to ask for a raise if you feel you deserve one. I've had those conversations with my boss numerous times, not just once, a couple of times a year. And think about it this way: the worst thing that could happen is they say no. So you have nothing to lose, and if you don't ask, you'll never know. So I've been pleasantly surprised where I didn't even think I was going to get something, and something happened. So don't sell yourself short, and always speak up for what you think you deserve.
Yes, agreed, 100%. Sam?
Yeah, it's always tough to go last because everyone has said all the points you want to say. So, but I think what I can add is maybe a slightly different perspective. I think I agree with everything Stephen and Masi and Galia said. I think as you try to step out of your comfort zone and be more aggressive, put yourself out there. It's also good to remember to try and be yourself, because you can only fake it for so long. I think if you want to have a long-lasting career, you want to be at a minimum comfortable with who you are and what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to be facing, imposter syndrome almost every day for a very long time. So for me, one thing that has served me is I agree. I had those challenges coming in. There's a small talk, there's a culture. You have no idea what people are talking about. You obviously have to pay attention to those things, but also at the end of the day, it's just trying to be authentic with who you are. Not to sound cliche, but that in itself will set you apart. Will make you interesting. There's a very low chance that the next person who sits next to you is Ugandan as well. So that in itself is a way for you to stand out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then I'll just add one last thing that my boss told me years ago is that you won't really go far or get promoted doing your job. You have to do more than your job. If your job is just you come in, just be on the computer and just do what you just like seek other projects that will make you stand out and not just do your day to day. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Dana?
Yeah, of course. So I just want to really talk about in the beginning when you're first starting out in your new career, you're thinking, where do I start? Where do I look to? Where do I go? I know it's something that I struggled with personally, getting into human resources. So I do have a question, and Mercy, this will start with you, is that what are some things that you wish you knew starting out that would have made getting into the field a lot less challenging for you?
Sure. I think for me, the biggest thing was just understanding the system. Again, this is the same thing that Stephen was referencing about understanding the corporate America language. And one good way of doing that is having a lot of conversations initially with people and just understanding, what is expected of the role. How do you quickly get up to speed on the role? What does excellent look like in a role? And then how do you get there? So that's the first thing, just really understanding what the system is, the expectations, and making sure that you're managing those expectations. The second thing was the power of your network. The way corporate America works is kind of like the godfather, where you need someone to be your godfather and really be your advocate when you're not in the room. A lot of the things you'll eventually find out happen when you're not in the room. And so having someone who's able to speak to your abilities, to speak to your characters, to speak to your accomplishments is really important. And one way of doing that is just continuously meeting people, developing relationships, seeing what you can do for other people, continue to engage them over time. And I know it's a lot of work to do it, but it's a necessary evil. And then I would say the last part of it is, personally for me, when I joined finance, I did finance in New York, and this was it was still in that era where finance was known to be, especially investment banking, which is where I started out, was known to be extremely brutal. And by brutal, meaning that people are considered to be very cutthroat, very aggressive. I did not expect that, right? And especially in Uganda, where everyone is friendly and happy, and we have a lot of focus on just having a good time. When I joined corporate America, just that environment was extremely difficult for me. And I think there's a certain point where it was just really, really hard to be at work. And so I would say that for anyone joining corporate America, it's going to be extremely hard those first few years, those first few months, those first few weeks, but continuing to hang in there and continuing to develop that network that's going to hold your hand when things get tight is really important.
Thank you so much, Mercy. And I definitely agree with all the points that you just said. It's hard, but you just have to keep pushing through. So thank you for sharing all of that. And Sam, can you share with us as well what challenges you wish you knew going into your profession?
Sure. So I just realized I didn't say this in my intro. So I went through the way I got my job out of college was through the ways people have described here, which was I was an intern between my junior and senior year. And this was back in 2008 when the financial world was upside down. But I think it's just a testament that even during those times, they were hiring interns into full-time programs. And then I've been at Citigroup since then. So I've been there for almost 12 years now. And I think to the question, things I wish I knew, I was fortunate to get into my internship program through a career prep program called MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. There's a similar program called SEO. They're geared towards prepping either minority students or students who, it's mostly minority students, prepping them for the corporate world. And the way I knew about those programs is because as a freshman in my school, I had other African friends who are either juniors or seniors at that time, and they told me about these things. Otherwise, I likely wouldn't have known about them. So I think it speaks to the point about if you're in college or if you're in high school, if the people a couple years ahead of you that you either whose paths you want to follow, reach out to them, speak to them, ask them what they're doing. And these programs help me, get interviews. They help me prep for those interviews. Polish up my resume. Think through interview questions. Think through what questions to ask in the interview. So I found that I was a great. I benefited a lot from that program, and I think I'm happy to share those details because I think it's definitely one of the best ways, especially if you're not in a quote unquote target school. It's a good way for different corporations to find you and for you to find them. I think one other point I'll mention is things I wish I had known. And this was probably me just coming out straight from Uganda was the whole concept of a cumulative GPA. I'm hoping everybody knows that now that it's everything is cumulative. And it's not just going to be your final year. So things like that, fortunately, I realized that, early on, and I made sure that, every semester I was doing well because I knew at the end of the day, it was going to be cumulative.
Thank you. And you're right. That's something to definitely pay attention to, like your GPA, staying on top of that. And I heard you mention the power of networking. sometimes just those connections that you don't think will make a huge impact that you even make in college can make a big difference. So I agree with you there. Thank you for sharing that. And Alan, can you please share with us?
Sure. Since Sam covered a lot of prep work before in college, I'll try to focus on once you get your first job or people that are already working, some things that might benefit people just starting out in their careers. Uh, I know we'll hammer this point home, but it's important enough that I don't mind repeating it. Uh, Building those relationships, be proactive about getting to know people outside your circle. It's especially important now that it's COVID. A lot of companies, a lot of people are working from home full time. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't branch out and network with people. I know if you're in the office, it's much easier to grab somebody, get a coffee with them, and get to know them. But now that you're remote, you have Teams, you have whatever channel you use to communicate with people. Don't be shy about reaching out to someone and having a virtual coffee with them, 10, 15 minutes. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to chat with you about what you do and just get to know what kind of work you do and understand what you do on a day-to-day basis. Again, worst thing they can do is say no. But that's one easy, you don't have to pay anything. It's an easy way to get to know people, especially now that everyone is siloed away in their remote spaces. And I've found that people are very willing to talk to people outside of their groups because they don't get to do that. It's even harder now. So use this time for that. And one other thing that I think I didn't know starting out, uh, I started my first job and I assumed, I remember asking my boss, so what time should I be here and what time should I leave? And yeah, they'll tell you the official HR 8 to 5, and that's what you should do if you want to just, work and get paid and, stay at your level. If you really want to move ahead, you really need to make sure you're there. At least in the industries I've been in, that's mostly tech and fintech. And I think, Marcy, you can attest to this. They're very aggressive people about time. Markets open at 9, but that doesn't mean you should be there at 9 because there's a lot of work to be done to prep for trades to get to the market. So traders are notoriously known for being there very early. So as technology people supporting the traders, we need to be there even earlier to make sure the systems they're going to be using are working perfectly. And sometimes there'll be times when you have to put in some late shifts or work later than the next person. And it doesn't mean that every job is kill yourself and work like crazy, but at the same time, if you expect to just work the 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, that probably won't cut it.
I agree. And I agree with you in the sense that you have to think outside of the box. I remember somebody one time told me something very insightful. They're just like, you might work from 9 to 5, but the things that you do after that matter just as much as what you do during those working hours. So you're really just making sure you're putting in the time there as well. And thank you for sharing that, Alan. And Stephen, if you could please share with us.
So a couple of points, some of which have been made, and maybe I'll just emphasize a few aspects to it. Well, one is, you've got to do more than the people around you, right? Corporate America is competitive, right? But it's large, so there's a space for you, right? But you've got to prove yourself, right? And starting out, the first thing you need to do is you've got to master your craft. Whatever your craft is, you've got to master your craft. And I don't think there are shortcuts to mastering your craft than spending some time reading about it, learning about it, talking to people about it, right? And that takes some time. It probably also takes some personal time. When I started out, I would spend maybe 3 to 4 hours over the weekend just reading up around whatever topic or issue I had dealt with the previous week, or I think I'll be dealing with the following week, right? And yeah, there's some personal sacrifice, but you've got to master your craft, because everything else we're talking about, connections, understanding the corporate American language, presupposes that you are a master of your craft, right? And, you know, some folks might lack the confidence of question their abilities, but, you know, you got hired. So there's something someone saw in you, right? And you just need to demonstrate and continue to demonstrate that ability. So that would be the first thing. The other thing, and folks have mentioned this, is the power of connections, the power of networking, right? I think culturally, we have a lot of friends, right? We have a lot of connections. We know a lot of people, right? Whether it's where we live now or back in Uganda or somewhere else, right? But I think we spend a lot of time and energy cultivating, developing, nurturing connections with respect to our personal life, right? And our buddies. But I would challenge each and every one of us to figure out if we spend the same amount of time, effort, and energy nurturing those professional connections, right? Because I think if we did, if we use the same zest and time in our professional connections, it would really work. I mean, and it's a bit of a, I don't know whether you call it a game. At times it's a bit of a game. When I came to this country, to be honest with you, I had no idea about baseball, American football, I had no clue, right? But I made it a point, right, to watch these games, learn as best as I could learn, right? You can learn. I mean, you watch a few baseball games and you begin to figure out, all right, okay, he's out because of, you know, 3 strikes. I mean, no one taught me that. I just looked at the games, right? Same with American football, right? And then I started watching it with some guys at work. I learned it. Now, why did I do that? Because I'd be in meetings and they'll say, oh, yeah, that was really good. That was a home run. Oh, that was a single. Or that was just simply a double. Yeah, he's a double kind of a guy. And you're like, what? I thought I was speaking English, right? So you've got to understand a little bit of that, right? And I saw in the chat, there was a question around how do you get into the old boys network, right? It is a challenge, but if you can't speak that language, if you can't relate, I mean, I mentored some I think there were 2 Asian ladies, and they were like, Stephen, we're not interested in baseball, we're not interested in football. I'm like, I'm not telling you to be interested in it. I'm not telling you to go watch it, you know, but understand it enough so that you don't get lost in the dialogue. Because if you get lost in the dialogue, you're lost, right? So those are the 2 points I'll make. And the connection part, and you know, I just happened to have a book here that I refer to every so often, right? It's called The Little Black Book of Connections, right? And it's just a bit of a handbook about how do you make connections? How do you make connections work for you, right? It goes to the point I was making about what are your professional connections? How do you nurture them? When do you nurture them, right? How much time are you spending nurturing them versus your personal relationships? Because these are investments that I think we each have to make on our own time if we want to aspire, because others are doing it. Your peers that you're working with are doing it. Mm-hmm. And it comes naturally to them, right? Because that's the culture they grew up in. They watch their parents, right? They're members of different golf courses, or they went to school together, right? So, I mean, you have a lot of catching up to do, but I think, confident that each of you can do it if you put the time in to do it.
Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. And I agree with a lot of the things that you just said. And I especially like your use of the word zest. I have not heard that in a while. Thank you. And you're right. It really is, it's usually what you invest in will show up, and it will show up in different aspects, be it your personal or professional life. So investing equally or even more, let's say in your professional career, will always have its returns. So thank you for that. And Senti, I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. So I have a funny, quick story um about Stephen. So I like I said, I interned with him at PwC back in my college, my junior year of college, which I think was sophomore year. And then so I go to PwC, in the floor, and I had never seen a black man, let alone a Ugandan man, command such respect from white peers. Like everyone was like, he was yeah, like he knew his stuff, and like they would like consult him for all these things, and he would. So that just showed me, oh my God. So if this Ugandan, man can do this, then so can I. So my point is that I think it's important to get a mentor within your company, even outside your company. Like get somebody who is who you aspire to, and then like maybe reach out, have like either monthly coffees, or reach out, get some advice, because that's going to help you. And then down the road, when it comes to promotions, they're going to vouch for you. So right now, my and I had this talk with my upper management. We have this thing like where to get I mean, and I think some companies have the same thing. To get promoted from, let's say, associate level to VP to director, you have to have like a director level vouch for you, or two of them. So if you stay in your bubble and you don't really make connections within work, then no one's gonna vouch for you. So you're gonna stay in the same role. So I see so many black people at my company who just stay in the same position because like maybe they don't network, or maybe there's no chance to work with upper management and then get that recognition to get you promotion. So that's something like if you can get a mentor, and then it's fine. Just bug them, email them. If they don't respond, follow up, because sometimes they're busy. It's not like they're ignoring you. They're busy. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And then when you get to that position as well, be a mentor, help somebody else. So just pay it forward. So going to the chat, some people asking about making, people who want to make a switch from, within the industry. So how to pivot from one industry to another. And I know some of the panelists, have engineering backgrounds, but they work in finance, banking. So Marcy, if you want to maybe take a few minutes to share your experience on that.
I think when you're younger in your career, it's still doing like a lot of research and seeing what's out there and networking and making sure people who are in those companies submit your resume, not necessarily just applying online, but submit your resume on your behalf. If you're more advanced in your career, the way I did it was through networking. It gets harder and harder to get a job the more senior you get. And so to get those roles that are going to pay you the compensation that you deserve, or that will give you the responsibilities that make sense, it almost always suddenly comes from your network. And so again, can't emphasize enough the importance of a network. And then for some people, you might consider doing an MBA. So when I those first years when things are really, really hard and I really wanted to get out of finance, I actually decided to go and do an MBA. And when I was about to graduate from the MBA just gives you it gives you a varied skill set that enables you to transition to multiple roles. So that would be another way of doing it, but it's an expensive way of doing it. So I'd say, like, if I was to categorize them, it would be leveraging your network to help you apply for a role, or to like call you for those right roles when they do come up.
Thanks, Mercy. Definitely very good points. Alan, I know that your background is engineering, right? And then I saw you doing the CFA. I'm like, this guy is crazy. So can you explain what made you do that, and your experience?
Sorry, I was on mute. Going back to what Steven said, learning the lingo As a software developer, usually you're handed requirements and execute a lot of. There's a term called code monkeys, just turn requirements to code. And I was sick of going into meetings where I didn't understand what these finance guys are talking about, stocks and buy, sells, and all this. There's a different lingo in finance, and if you're not up to date, you really get lost. So I also started questioning what the requirements were because I wanted to get to the source. There's always a middleman, there are always BSAs and these product owners who shield developers from the business. And I remember one session I attended, one of those career advising sessions in work. Someone did say that be close to the front office if you really want to get far. So as a developers usually you're in the back office, which is okay if that's what you want, but it's also very important to get closer to the people at the front, the traders, the portfolio managers, and because in finance especially, those are the people that make the money for the company. If you work in a software specific firm, then the developers make the product. But in a finance or hedge fund, it's the portfolio managers or the traders, the front office that really makes the moves. So to me, that was just a combination of trying to understand what goes on behind the scenes. Again, back to what Steven said, just putting in the time, your extra time beyond just your day-to-day job, because if anybody has done that, the CFA, it's really an intensive program. It's on your own time, it's self-study, there's no school, so it takes a lot of time and dedication to do it. But even through it, I slowly started to understand what's going on, and opportunities show up where if you have that on your resume, you'd get considered beyond just a person who's might just have the programming background. So that has enabled me to get the role I'm in, where I'm working directly or leading the team that's talking to the head traders and the portfolio construction group, because then they know that they don't have to. Uh, there's this stereotype that developers of software people don't communicate well. So there's that niche where there's a high need for people who can both understand the software or write software, but also speak the technical language in terms of finance, who can understand what the finance requirements are. So to me, that's fascinating, and that's where I was hoping to um, get.
So it sounds like it's really important to keep learning and not just stay. You got to keep engaging yourself and do more than what's required if if you want to make it, right?
Uh, Not if you want to make it. I mean, there's people who just want to work 9 to 5 and go home. That's perfectly fine too. It's if you want to get more than what you do, you really have to put in the time and effort. Uh, and if you want to just stay where you are, that's perfectly fine too. I'd say you could just not do anything too.
Hmm.
But if you really want to, you expect to put in some time beyond just your 9 to 5 to get to where you want to go.
Definitely. So Steven, as a JD working at a big four, what has been your experience with those different? I mean, I know law and accounting kind of merge, with taxation and stuff. But like, what's your experience with those different industries and being in the middle?
So yeah, no, I mean, there's actually a pretty interesting story to that, because I've never done accounting. The only exposure I've had to accounting in a formal sort of education piece was when I was at LDC. There was a class on, I think it was accounting, tax law, and proprietorship, right? So it's really just a little course to help lawyers who set up their own, practice, right? To understand how, their books might be kept, right? So it's not any kind of accounting, to be honest with you. So one of the things, and this goes to what Alan was referring to, one of the things I did was I spent some time learning or teaching myself sort of accounting 101, right? And paying particular attention when I was talking to people, what they were talking about and trying to figure it out. And where I didn't, I'll go talk to my peers who were accountants, right? To help, to help me out, right? But I think what that does is that diversity of skill set, right? So you get a tax lawyer that knows accounting, right? Is powerful, right? Actually, I think after 2 years or 3 years, I almost decided to go and pursue an MBA. But when I looked at the ROI on it, I decided not to do it. I figured I could just continue on the current track, teaching myself accounting and learning on the job, right? Then going to business school, right? But that was me. I mean, somebody else can do a different equation. But I think, Senti, to your question, I think you've got to distinguish yourself from the rest of the pack. And we all can decide what it is you want to do to distinguish yourself, whether you go and do an MBA, right? And some of these MBAs, I think actually Babson offers them, and there are a bunch of schools that offer them, right? You could do them overnight, right? At night, or just at times even over the weekend, not even at night, right? Or you do what Alan did, right? And did an MFA, right? I opted not to like go do accounting and become a CPA, so I'm not a CPA. But I think it goes to the point that you have to invest in yourself, and folks, that means, and I truly believe this, that you're investing in yourself. You're not investing in the company, right? So I can walk out of PwC tomorrow, right? And my skill set, knowledge-based experience, and actually most of my connections walk out with me, right? And so you're not doing it for the company, you're really doing it for yourself, right? And so when I talk about learning your craft and investing time, spending a few hours over the weekend just to invest in yourself, it's truly an investment in yourself that no one can take away. You can leave and move company to company and it will go with you. It's your brand, it's your personal brand.
Yes, agree 100%. And to your point, I did my MBA at Babson, and it was a nice program. It was it's called blended. So we had online classes from Monday through Friday. Then we went into the school every probably month or 2 months for weekends. So we did online Monday through Thursday, then came in Friday all day and Saturday all day. And I finished my MBA in, I think, 21 months. So, that worked out because I was able to do the online stuff, get some time at work and then come home and do it. So that kind of helped me with that. So there's options. And now even with COVID, it's even easier now to do all that if you really want to expand your expertise and, be an SME in certain fields. So Sam, can you speak a little bit on...
Could you explain what SME is for some people?
Subject matter expert. So in you notice in certain industries, like in certain companies, like you want to be the go-to guy, and that's one way to do it. And you can also like network or just keep learning, but that's one way to do it, is like so that way you're a little less expendable. So Sam, I believe you've been doing finance most of your career, right? Same industry?
Right.
Can you speak on that transition from working in New York to London, and how was that for you?
Sure. Maybe before I get to that, just to add on one point about moving into a new industry, and I think it's something that's going on in the chat. I think Joseph mentioned this. Definitely one way to do that is by keeping an eye on open roles within your company. And there's always roles that are posted on your company's career website. So that's just one way, at least that has worked for me. And then Santi, to your question about moving, I think it also is point to make there is just keeping an open mind about different roles, different geographies. If you work for a global company, one thing that has always interested me is just working different parts of the world. New York is very exciting. London is very exciting, and I think if Hong Kong had opened up, I wouldn't have been shy to take it up. The transition was seamless, if I'm being honest, because and I think it goes to one of the points we've talked about earlier about keeping a network wherever you go. So it was easy to transition because I had friends who had done a similar thing before, found friends who are in a new city. So it was fairly straightforward in that sense. And I think also being around more Ugandans, to be honest, was a plus for me. I didn't have that experience before, and having,
I think so. Can you guys please mute yourself? I'm not sure who that is. Thank you. Sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was going to say, from a transition point of view, the only thing I'd probably add is that it's good to move around as well, because at least in my experience, it has helped me not get too comfortable in a certain seat or a certain position. And one of the challenges I found is when I've stayed in a particular seat or a particular role, there can be a tendency to get too comfortable, and this ability to move around has helped me deal with that.
All right, thank you, Sam. And I agree, because that just shows you that you shouldn't get stuck in one thing. If something's not working out here, you can always move to a different location. And I'll add something that I've noticed is it's probably better if you can to work if you're working at a company, to get a company that's headquartered in that city, or like there's probably more opportunities versus a smaller. So that's like a little thing that I've had experience with. So it's different working in a company that's probably global, but then they have like a small office in Boston, so you won't have as much internal mobility because there's not too many roles. So just something like to keep in the back of your mind. Diana?
Yeah. So thank you for that, Sam. And I actually just wanted to ask you a question in regards to what you just said, because you did mention that you moved with your family. So to this extent, it does involve the work-life balance, which can be tricky, I'm sure, as most of us know. So just what are some ways that you feel like either maybe you've had to sacrifice one for the other, or have you been good with balancing your time? I know time management is something that is very difficult for a lot of people in general. So what do you have any tips to share that maybe helped you be able to be successful in your career, as well as balance just the rest of your life and your family and friends and everything in between?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing in terms of balancing work life and other things, like Senti, doing his MBA while working, Alan doing his CFA. I did my master's as well while I was working. I think it all comes down to a level of commitment and discipline. And an MBA or whatever master's you're doing while you're working can take 18 to 24 months. If you slip, it could take 4 or 5 years. So I think that there needs to be a level of commitment and discipline in whatever you're doing. I think family work-life balance is always going to be a challenge as well. I think it helps to have being aligned with your partner in whatever it is you're trying to do, and not being shy to communicate what your outside responsibilities are at work. And that's something I didn't do initially. I was afraid to take time off, yet I could take time off. I did, and for a long time I never took my full vacation days, for example. I think it comes to a point Alan made earlier about our culture. So I think just being comfortable to tell people that, look, I can't do X, Y, Z because I have to, attend my kid's school play or something like that. And once I was able to clearly, separate the two, it has served me well. Now, there's obviously, you'll be getting emails throughout the night sometimes, and that's expected. But I think it's one thing that has served me well is I think it's the discipline. I think it's having an agreement with your partner or whatever situation you have. And I think the third thing is being vocal about what's important to you outside of your work, so that your colleagues, that your boss, those people are aware that when Sam is home on a Sunday, he is not going to respond to your emails unless you call him.
Thank you for that, Sam. We appreciate it. And I agree with the things that you've been saying. And I also did hear you mention that it's good to speak up when either you need to take time off and be vocal about it. But I do also want to bring up is that just because of the world we live in, unfortunately, and I know it's happened to me, being a woman in corporate America can be difficult, especially when you're trying to juggle, let's say, raising children. Not that the man does not raise the children as well, of course, but it's just a little more difficult, at least what I've found. And even without children, as a woman, sometimes speaking up is difficult. So Mercy, this is a question for you, is that, as you've been climbing the ladder in corporate America, how are you able as a woman to facilitate those conversations of making sure that you're speaking up for yourself, getting your points across, and balancing your work and home life?
Oof. Jesus, where do I start from? It was not easy. It's still not easy. I would say earlier on in my career, one thing I realized was that I need to get good at my technical skill set. So whatever it is that is required for your job, getting really good at it and being very quick at doing it, right? So when you in finance, in the earlier years, it involves a lot of financial modeling. So getting really good and quick at developing your financial models and making sure that they're correct. And then 2, being able to communicate what it is you've done in a clear way that people understand. And then 3, making sure that anytime you take on anything, you set up expectations with your team as to what is required and what is a timeline and the delivery schedule. What those things do is they save you a lot of time in terms of, not spending too much time just trying to build a model or whatever, or doing the wrong thing and then the team is expecting something else. And then as I advanced on in my career, one thing that became very clear to me is the people who you work with really, really matter. And so I have been very deliberate when it comes to choosing the people who I work with. Obviously, you don't always get that. But what that means is that people are more understanding of, 1, what are your goals at work professionally to develop? 2, they hear you when you speak. 3, they are your sponsor when you're not in the room. And then 4, they're always looking out for you, whether it's at work or outside of work. And then when it comes to balancing, being at work or being out of work, I think I started getting away from the phrase of work-life balance, because I feel like at some point in time I was trying to do this 50-50 thing where, I'm like, work is going to be this amount of time and then everything outside of work is going to be this amount of time. And I found that to be difficult to balance. The way I look at it is seasons. So there's going to be seasons where work is really demanding and I really need to put in time to execute and deliver what is expected of me. And there's going to be times when I'm going to have to prioritize my life outside of work and I'll really be focused on prioritizing that part of my life. And so the way I think about it is balancing those 2 seasons and making sure that my team is flexible when I'm balancing those 2 things. I think in terms of being generally a Black woman in corporate America, always goes back to who do you know, who is your sponsor? Can they speak for you when you're not in the room? Because there's times when I've done things where, it's like a great delivery, but because I'm not in the room to speak about my delivery, I have been able to grab additional opportunities just because someone was there speaking for me. I think a lot is said in those rooms that we are not in. And as a Black woman, especially, it's very important to have those people in the room. And especially when it comes to promotions, right? Promotions are not given. And even if you work hard, it doesn't mean you'll get it. I think for me, especially as I become more senior, I realized that having the right people is really important for them to speak for me when I'm not in the room. And then I think going back to what I said earlier, it's just not giving up. You're always going to meet people who are biased, who have their thoughts of, how did you get here? How your accent is different. You went to a non-target school. You don't have like technical capabilities, right? People just make all these assumptions about you. And so seeing through those microaggressions and realizing that it's not necessarily you, but it's people's projections of their ignorance on you. And working through that is really important when you embark on this finance career.
Thank you, Mercy. And you're right, it can get really rough. And, from what I've been told, the financial sector can be pretty cutthroat. So you have to have pretty thick skin, from what I've been told. And also, just this question is for you, Stephen. In your career, you've achieved so much success. You've climbed the ladder, all the way to the top. And as a Black man, and also as a Black African man. And you mentioned earlier is that you actually had a lot of instances where you had to put in a lot more work. You had to put in extra hours and do all of that. In between that, with your work-life balance, how were you able to manage doing all of that? And also, did you experience maybe any microaggressions? How did you handle them? And how were you able to push through and still get to the position that you did?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I think you're going to find naysayers along the way. One remark that was made to me that I've never actually publicly stated was someone told me that there was no way I probably would succeed in Boston. I should try Atlanta, right? And Atlanta obviously is not majority, but there are more Black professionals in Atlanta than they are in Boston, generally speaking, right? And I bit my tongue and I said, everyone is entitled to their view. And so I recall jumping onto the train to go home, and it really irked me. And I had one of those delayed reactions, when you get upset after the fact, when you've left the scene, right? But I said, okay, a lot of people like us, before us, right, sacrificed so much for us to be where we're at, right? And I sort of took it upon myself as a personal challenge, right? So I think what that did was it just gave me more incentive, more, it probably caused the reverse reaction, right? Because I was now more determined than ever, right? And so I think when you find naysayers or you find obstacles, right, take it upon yourself that is a personal challenge, right? Think about all the sacrifices I am sure a lot of your parents and your parents' parents, relatives, right, have made for you to get to where you're at, right? And use that as incentive to drive you through, right? You will definitely find obstacles. And the question is, how do you deal with them, right? Personally, and it's just my perhaps nature, is you deal with them not in a confrontational way, but you deal with them by proving that particular point incorrect, which basically means you learn to do something better than anybody else around you. So fast forward, this particular individual, I don't know, 5 years later, maybe 6 years later, became my direct report. Now, he probably does not even remember he said it, right? But I think, which goes to the second piece, which is in life, the people you come across, going back to connections and networks, right, can either help you or hurt you, right, depending on what you do in that situation, right? So it's always interesting to me that when you meet someone, right, think about them as a possible advocate or ally, right? Until they prove themselves otherwise, right? So I think, Dan, I mean, it's a tough question, but I think that to me, I think at the end of the day is there's nothing we can do. We live in a society, and God knows this year has proved to all of us what kind of society we live in, leave alone I don't want to get into the whole political situation we're in, but it's proved to us the society we live in or the world we live in, right? And the question is, what are you going to do about it, right? Yeah, you can go on the streets and protest, not bad, but you can't do that alone, right? Buckle up and prove the folks around you wrong. Be better than them, right? And you can do it, but the only thing is you might be starting a few paces behind everybody else, which is fine. You just need to invest the time, energy, and effort and work on your connections to make up that gap and overtake them.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I appreciate it. Sorry to ask such a loaded question there. I was just very curious. But also just, I see that from what I'm hearing or from what you're saying, it's tough, but it's doable. And that really is the key takeaway from that. So thank you. And my next question actually is for you, Alan. I know that you have two beautiful children, a lovely wife. I'm sure there must be some work-life balance aspect there. How does that dynamic work out, and how are you able to juggle both?
Um, yeah, you don't. So, this is advice I gave somebody just messaged me privately about the CFA. If you're planning to take that, speak to your partner before you do it. I made the mistake of not doing it, and I still get flack for it till today because it's very time intensive. If you plan to do an MBA, what some say, make sure your partner knows because it's not just you going away. It's you're affecting, like in my case, my wife spends the extra time dealing with the kids while I go away and study. So that balance is a little tricky. If you're in grad school, if you're not yet, if you're a younger person, if you're still an undergrad or just starting out in your career, invest the time now, do all that stuff now. That's one thing I should have probably done because it's a lot harder to do these things when you have responsibilities, when you have a wife, when you have kids, work, mortgage, things to deal with. One thing I didn't appreciate is how much free time I had in my 20s. You think you're busy, but it gets a lot. It's a lot of free time you have. So in terms of balancing communication, speaking with your work, like some said, right now it's a little, in times when we're all working remote, make use of whatever tools you use to communicate, whether it's Teams or Skype or the notifications where you can set your time away. make sure you utilize those things. If you work till 6, because we're remote now, it's very easy to work extra and you don't even realize it. So make a hard stop and let everyone who messages you know that you've gone away, you're done for the day, you're not responding to messages, because it's very easy to get sucked into work and have it run your life. And yeah, work is great, and all this stuff we're talking about is great, but at the end of the day, there are more important things in life too. Um, you work hard to make all this money, but it won't mean much if your wife or your family is not with you to enjoy it. So take time off to enjoy time, spend time with your family and the people who are important to you. Yeah, it's easier said than done. I'm not good at it, but it's something I work at every day.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Takes time. And thank you, Alan, for sharing that. And Cynthia, I will pass it.
Could you guys please mute? Okay, I did. Okay, so there's so the last thing is, so there's something that wait, are you asking me or am I asking the next question? Sorry.
I believe we're done with the
What?
questions.
I have one that just came up that I
Okay.
think we need to address quickly is us as Ugandans or as Africans, Black people, whatever, we have this thing, we shun this topic that's really a major factor, but we don't really discuss it. It's compensation, right? When you get your offer, many times, even me in the past, the first offer you get, you take it because you're desperate. You're like, if I counter them, they'll just receive their offer letter or whatever. But that's not the case. So have you guys had an experience with that? And how, because like there's different things like Glassdoor, which is an app that you can use to see the average salary for that role that you're applying for. And then we've had some, I mean, I'm sure you guys we've all had this, where like you're working with like a recruiter, and then they ask you, how much are you making at your job, right? So that question, I think, is now legal in certain states. But then, so that's what causes that wage gap, is because if you're going to be paid based on how much you're making now, then that's not going to really, get you up. So how have you guys navigated that, and how has been what's been your experience? Mercy, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my experience is a little different because when I graduated undergrad, I did a structured analyst program. And then when I graduated business school, I did a structured associate program, meaning that when you're starting out in those programs, your first year, everyone's salary is the same, right? What you give is what you get. I tried to negotiate and they just didn't budge, and they didn't budge for anyone. Well, as far as I know. However, there was a sign-on bonus, and I think there's usually some flexibility with that. So I'd say the first thing is, especially when you're in those structured programs, is thinking about creative ways to negotiate those other types of compensation. And then the more I've advanced, one of the things that I'm very deliberate about is knowing what compensation structures look like in the market. What is my market rate, right? And one of the best ways to do that is to interview every year with a different company, get an offer, see how much they're offering you, and get to know what your market rate is. So you always have to know what the market rate is and go and negotiate at work, right? And then I would say if you're also younger in your career, there's a lot of schools that publish their salary ranges, right, for the various classes. So I know, for example, so I went to MIT for my MBA, and MIT every year publishes what their class gets, right, for their various salary. So looking up those various schools and seeing how much people are getting paid and making sure that the offer you're getting is not below what that offer amount is. So it's a combination of a lot of research, knowing your worth, and being able to negotiate and talk to people about it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the actual negotiation conversation. There's a formula to it. And what I'll tell people is, and I always forget what this acronym means, but I just know what it means in my head, which is BATNA, BATNA. So look it up. It's a way of structuring your negotiation conversations such that you're not only speaking about what you want, but also what you bring to the table. And then that brings me to my last thing, which is if the skill set, the technical skills, if you haven't had impact, if you haven't exceeded expectations, it's very hard to have those compensation conversations. And so before you embark on any compensation conversation, it's very important to know what you bring to the table and your value and being able to speak to it.
Yeah, true. So yeah, so I did that in my in my class, might be a BATNA. So it's your best agreement to, I forget, sorry, but yeah, so the whole point is you need to know, your high and low, and like the point where, like you must have like a bottom, like, I can't go below this salary, and then like a high, and then try to meet in the middle. Sam, do you have any experience with that?
I do, and I think the next time it comes up, I'll probably need to ask Mercy to come and negotiate on my behalf. But no, I think jokes aside, I agree with a lot of the points. I've had a couple of instances in my career where I've had to negotiate compensation. Similar to Mercy, I had a structured analyst program, a structured associate program. I became a VP. Things started to become a little bit more blurry. Then I became a director, and it's a lot. It's just opaque at the moment. So it really comes down to performance. But I'll say a couple of things. I've had opportunities to negotiate between career progression in terms of promotion versus compensation. I've had opportunities to negotiate for relocation packages, and they've been very good learning experiences for me. The one thing that has worked is that in the instances where I've been successful, it's usually when I'm coming from a position of strength, where I have more leverage. So to Mercy's point, it's knowing what you bring to the table. And that really feeds back into a lot of the things we've been saying today about working hard, having people to vouch for you. And it could be within your company, within your career, but also with respect to recruiters, for example, who reach out. Usually I don't say no when recruiters reach out to me, not because I'm interested in moving, but I'm interested in knowing what else is out there. Because I hate to say it, as good as we may all be at our jobs, we are not indispensable. So I think it's helpful to keep that in the back of your mind and keep an eye out on what's going on around you, because that gives you perspective around what your competitors are paying, and it will help you in your negotiations as well.
Thank you, Sam. Definitely agree. And something else that people negotiate is you can negotiate your sign-on bonus. So that's like money that people leave on the table, sign-on bonus and percentage. Maybe if it's like a startup company, you can try to see if you can get some shares if they go public. So those are like different ways to negotiate. Stephen, do you have any experience with that?
No, I did not negotiate my offer. I probably should have, but I think 2 years in, one of my friends at the time, this Irish girl, comes to me and says, "Stephen, I think we're being underpaid." And I'm like, "How do you know that?" "Oh, I was talking to one of my classmates who was at a law firm, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, okay. Well, so what are you going to do about it right now? So this is the humility, modest cultural issue we have, right? She goes like, "I want to go talk to them. Let's go." And I'm like, "Hell no, I'm not doing that." Anyway, so she goes like, "Well, I'm going to go talk to them for both of us." So I was like, whatever. So she went, came back and says, "You owe me. They're going to give us a raise." And to this day, she's still a friend of mine. Her first, every time we text, she goes like, "Oh, you know that what you owe me is still accruing interest, right?" So I guess the point of that is, I totally agree with everybody. you got to negotiate. So I'm now on the other side, right? I see the offers we give out and I hear back what the counter offers are, right? And so I can tell you from that perspective, right? It's definitely a negotiation, right? Some will accept outright, will accept the counter offer outright. Others will negotiate down. But I haven't seen an occasion in the years I've been doing this where we've said, oh, they've counter offered, so forget it. We won't talk to them again. It just doesn't happen, right? We'll either stick to our guns and say, nope, that is the offer and we think that's fair, or we'll accept it, or we'll counter, do a counter to their counter offer, right? But it also goes to what I think Sam and Mercy were saying. If you are sort of coming in with some sort of a structured arrangement, so like when we hire folks coming out of college, right? For the most part, it's the same salary, all of them, right? We don't deviate. I mean, even if you came back and counter offered, we probably would say no, right? But on the other hand, if you're coming in and you're coming in with some experience, right? Because everyone's experience is different, you definitely have room for negotiation in that respect because there's no standard, right? Now the other thing you've got to realize that on that companies do is, right, if I hire you at a certain point, right, with a certain skill set, the other thing I'm going to try to have to deal with is what we call salary compression, right? So if I hire you as a second or third year associate, and I already have 5, 6, 7, 10 other second or third year associates, and I give you more than I'm paying them, right? From a fairness perspective, I can only accept that within a certain amount, knowing that I can bring the folks who are within the company up to where you are, maybe in the next promotion cycle, right? So there's, when companies come back to you on a counter offering, what they're really doing is they're trying to figure out that compression gap, right? How fast can I bring the rest of the team up? Right, so there's parity because no one wants, there's a rule when you're dealing with this, which is if everyone's salary was left on the printer, right, would you be ashamed of it? And you would if people are doing the same thing, the same skill set, and there's such a big gap. So that's what the back and forth is when you're talking to companies that they're trying to figure out.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Alan, real quick, do you have anything you want to add on?
I know that's very great information, Stephen. And just to add to that gap you're talking about, just speaking from when, at least we're trying to hire, whether it's contractors or full-time, try to find out what that ceiling is for that job you're trying to interview for or get into, because there's always the max that they can go to, and they'll always try to shoot within a certain range of that max. And then my own personal experience has been when I switched companies. My first role, I was obviously an immigrant here, so I was on an H-1B visa. And companies, especially tech companies, are notorious for, if they know you are in an H-1B, you're in a position where you're kind of desperate. You can't lose your job, because if you lose your job, you have a list. I don't know if it's changed recently, but if you lose it, you have a certain amount of time before you find another job or leave the country. So they can lowball you, and you feel like you're tied to that company. It's not easy to switch. So when I switched, I had a target in mind, and when they went above that, I was excited. Wow. It's only when I started at the new company and having my first review, I realized and what talking to my boss was impressed with my work. It's like, yeah, we have to really, you kind of low, bring up your salary. I realize, oh, you might think you're doing well, but the company is always, it's like a casino. They always come out on top. So always assume that the you're probably not getting what you're worth. That's the safe assumption to make. So, and I'm saying all this with the background that everyone else has been spouting. You're doing well and your work speaks for itself. Don't sell yourself short. It's end of year season right now. Most of you are filling out your end of year reviews. Um, if you know you've put in the time and the effort this year, be aggressive in seeking what you're worth.
Yeah, and no, for sure. And then just to add something real quick is blow for yourself. Like no one else will. Like your boss might not even know what you're doing, but say I did these macros. I improved this process from 2 hours to half an hour. Those things you need to say them so that so that your boss knows, because they might not know. So that, you're leaving money on the table pretty much. Now you're in mute.
Let me try that again. Thank you, Senti. I do agree with you. Interestingly enough, I'll just give an example of advocating for yourself. In my previous position, I had a very good relationship with my boss. We were very close, and she would always just be very honest with me. And she was, this very strong but genuine white woman that told me, she was like, you know what, Diana, you don't advocate for yourself. Every time I hear of you doing great things, I'm hearing it from everybody else, but you never tell me what you can do. It's like nobody will ever know what you can do or utilize you the correct way until you speak up for yourself. So I really do encourage you. It might be the smallest thing, like maybe you're a pro at Excel or a pro at this, or you do that. Make sure you get the word out there so people can know. Otherwise, they'll just be guessing. So she did change my perspective. I do now mention extracurricular activities that I do, even things outside of work that you think might have an influence on what you do inside the workplace. I would highly suggest that you let it be known what your qualities are and what you can bring to the table. But we have run out of time. It's not on our side today, but I will ask just for our panelists, first of all, thank you so much for everything that you've talked about today, all the great advice you've given us, all the insight. We would just like to ask you to give some closing remarks before we do end the session. And Alan, if you'd like to go first.
I'll just repeat everything I've been saying the whole night. Don't sell yourself short. Speak up for yourself, and if you've done the work, make sure you get paid what you deserve.
Thank you, Alan. And Mercy?
This is something I haven't said before, which is your brand matters. Be very deliberate about the brand that you're building. Be very clear about what you want to be known for and who you want to be known for. And then control the narrative around your brand. So make sure that the narrative that's out there about you is the right narrative. And then perception is reality, right? So you might think of your brand as one way, but people perceive you as another way. So be very deliberate about making sure that you're being perceived as you seem to perceive your own brand. So basically, this is it's another way of saying control the way people think about you, whether it's from a technical skill set or from a leadership skill set.
Thank you for that, Mercy. And Sam?
It's always tough going after Mercy. So I don't know if this was intentional, but
Sorry.
no, I think just from my side, it's being aware of what your weaknesses are. I think it's something which some of us take a long time to acknowledge. You can be in a career and try to avoid doing things that you're not good at. You'll be doing yourself a disservice if you do that. I think it's something which I didn't address earlier on, and the way to do that is by looking for opportunities where you can learn. You just have to constantly be pushing yourself And in situations where you're working long hours and something is really stressful, there's always a silver lining. You're learning something new. You're getting a new skill set. So I think that is something to keep in mind. And again, we've been sharing a number of resources in the chat group. Take a look at those, and feel free to reach out. Happy to share my contact info with anyone who wants to chat.
Thank you, Sam. We appreciate that. And Stephen?
I would say, as a closing remark, invest in yourself, invest in your craft, your skill set, both in terms of diversifying your skill set so you can distinguish yourself, but just mastering the skill set that you already have, right? And then secondly, I would say invest in your relationships, your professional relationships, as I said, with as much, valor and time, effort as you do in your personal relationships, right? Because it's not a job, it's a career, right? And therefore, just like a relationship, a personal relationship, you need to invest in it.
Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate that. And again, thank you to all four of you for your time today, your expertise, your knowledge. It's been invaluable, and I've received a lot of great gems. I'm sure everybody has as well in the chat. And in closing, I would just like to say thank you all for joining us today that's on the chat. And a strong belief that I have personally is that connections of this nature are very important. And especially during these difficult times, I'm really hopeful for the future. And it's because of open dialogue like this and networking that we're able to do this, that we will be able to move forward and build a better future for our children, for our children's children, and really build those solid foundations. And also, if you would like to connect, there is information in the group chat in regards to how to connect with each panelist. And if there's anybody in particular you want to connect with, please reach out to either Senti or myself, and we'll be happy to connect you with who you'd like to be connected with. And Senti, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you. Again, thanks everyone for joining. And Sam, I know it's almost 1 a.m. in the UK, so appreciate you and the wife allowing us to share with you. A few quick comments. I have some people who have there's a company called PTC, which is right actually next to you, Stephen. They have some internships. So if you're interested in internships or some entry-level positions, please email me, and or just send your resume to that email address, and then I will forward it on. And then if you have any other, if you want to send your resume, we can try to see how we can, put it in the system and make something happen. And then there's this new group that I'm a part of. It's called Ugandan Support from the Diaspora. And I'm gonna have Ivan do a quick intro on that. And if people are interested in helping out, just reach out. Ivan, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there you
go. Can you enable screen sharing for me?
Yep.
Let me know.
Try now, can you?
Yeah, I can. Thank you. Hopefully you can all see my screen. I can't tell. Okay. So firstly, thank you to the panelists. You guys were amazing. You did great. I definitely learned a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. I know we're short of time, so I'm going to speak really quickly and make this really short. My name is Ivan. I'm part of Ugandan Support from the Diaspora. It's a new organization that a group of us in the diaspora are starting up. And the purpose of the organization, it's going to be a nonprofit organization. We are currently incorporated and are working on getting our 501c3 in the US, so we're a nonprofit. The objective of the group is to improve the future for less fortunate children in Uganda. Essentially, the history behind this is at the beginning of quarantine, a WhatsApp group that a bunch of us are in someone shared a video and it was showing the conditions in a particular school in Uganda where, you know, these kids are sitting on top of each other. Some of them are sitting outside under a tree, things like that, things that a bunch of us maybe never experienced, but they're things that actually are happening in Uganda right now. So we figured, you know, how can we actually help? Because we've been fortunate enough to get where we are. So how can we actually give back to the people in Uganda, the children in Uganda in particular? So we decided to form this group with the objectives being, you know, to work to improve access to education in Uganda, work to better the communities that the children grow up in, and work to better the living conditions for the children in Uganda. In that, you know, if we're educating, not us, but if the children are educated, if they're shown a better way of life, they're probably going to grow up to be better and potentially give back to their communities. And that starts with us, honestly. There we go. The way we plan to do this is by partnering with organizations in Uganda or out of Uganda, but doing work in Uganda. We plan to essentially, most of the partnering will involve us giving them money towards either a particular project or just giving them money and having them distribute it according to what they need. Some of the organizations that we've picked and are planning to work with so far are Grace Villa, Kavale, Teach the Children Uganda, So Uganda, Concern for the Girl Child. And all these are organizations, nonprofit organizations. One of them is actually based here in the US. The rest are kind of US, Uganda. But the thing is, we've vetted these organizations, we've talked to them, we've interviewed them, things like that. And so we plan to essentially partner with them, send them money maybe once a quarter. Once we collect the money, we send it over to them, and either they distribute it according to how they see fit, or we work with them to figure out what is the best way we would like for them to spend our money, depending on, you know, our conversations with them. Also, there's also other ways to partner with them. For example, So Uganda, when we were talking to them, they were really interested in having Ugandans in the diaspora come on and advise them, because they're based in America. So, and they didn't go to school in Uganda. They don't know a lot of what actually living life in Uganda is like. So they were like, you know, if we had some Ugandans actually advise us on what's the best way to approach some of the things that we're trying to do there, it would be great. So in that sense, our group is then working with them. The members of our group are working with them, not just giving money, but then also advising them, volunteering, maybe mentoring some of their students, things like that. At the moment, again, we're still setting the organization up. We're still filling in the paperwork with the goal of starting officially January 2021. But we've already started doing a few things here and there. A few weeks ago, we contributed to Teach the Children Uganda. They had a fundraiser, and a few members of our group contributed. They got one of our members to run a 20K, and people contributed to that member actually running the 20K, and the money was then given to Teach the Children. We're working on a one-off Christmas giving, if I can call it that, where we're potentially going to collect money and try to give money to either a family or group of families in Uganda, and that's something we're also currently working on. So it's things like that where we're just essentially trying to pay forward, because we've been fortunate enough in our lives. Currently, our memberships, we have members mostly from the US, but we have a few in Canada and the United Kingdom. The membership responsibilities would include a $25 a month contribution to the organization, participating in fundraising initiatives, non-monetary contributions to some of the organizations, like I mentioned, something like SOUL, and then to serve in various positions of the organizations for those willing and able. So we have an executive committee. We have a chairman, a chairperson, secretary, auditor, treasurer. We have bylaws. So all these things actually take time to set up, and a bunch of us have actually contributed our time to kind of set this up. And so that's one of the things that we would require from our members from time to time, to be willing to serve on these different committees. If you are interested, feel free to contact us at givingbacktouganda@gmail.com. That's our email. And then that's our Instagram that we just got set up. And we're also working on setting up our website and other forms of communication. That's all I had to say. Kind of ran through that, but if you have any questions, that's the email. Feel free to shoot us an email or reach out to Senti. He'll be sure to put you in contact with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. So once again, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, you can email ugbuddy@gmail.com. We have our next session is in 2 weeks. It's going to be on healthcare. So we have healthcare coming up. We have STEM. Then we have art. So different sessions for different parts of, different industries. So if you have people that want to be panelists, please let me know, or, any way you can help. We appreciate it. And everyone have a good night and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Good night.
Good night.